We're glad to know you're still there. Welcome back. We are being joined by Senior Financial Analyst at Nairametrics, Jerimiah Ubah. Good morning and welcome to the program, Ubah. Hello, Ubah, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Good morning.
Okay. We're glad to have you, and there's something scary. In your report, John Hanke, professor of economics, says our inflation rate in Nigeria is an eye-popping 52%, not what we've been told, 20.8% official record that has been reported for September 2022. Explain how this professor came by this conclusion.
If there's one thing to note is that the parameters used by the NBS are different from the parameters used by Professor Steve Hawkins. When Steve Hawkins calculated the inflation rate, he used what we call the PPP, something that usually factors in the foreign exchange rate in real time. So the NBS, on the other hand, uses a basket of commodities. So this is actually a difference in methodology. But according to this professor, he feels that to depict the inflation rate in Nigeria, a country that has high inflation rates like Nigeria, this is actually a formidable way to go. And if you look at what is happening in the streets, nobody will say goods are increasing by 22%. They would rather say that the goods are doubling. And if you look at the method that the NBS uses, they use around 700 and something goods. And with a country as vast as Nigeria, this is a very minute commodity basket to actually capture what the economy is trading in real time, while the PPP accounts for all commodities traded in real time. So this is actually a difference in methodology. Other countries calculate inflations with baskets. So this is not like something that is exceptional. But international organizations like the IMF and the EU and the World Bank also use the PPP. So Hanks now brings out a watch list of which Nigeria ranks around the 23rd country with the highest inflation in his watch list. And this is actually showing that the country is actually far worse than the projections that we are seeing. Thank you very much.
But my worry is some of these parameters that are being used to measure some of the things that we see, shouldn't they be local? Should we rely mostly on what the international community, if I may, will give to us and swallow it hook, line, and sinker? Because even in a democracy, some people say there should be parameters to measure it according to what is obtainable locally. Shouldn't that apply also to the economics?
Okay, it's not about the international organizations. This is a theory that has been proven time and time again. If you deep dive into the PPP theory, which is the purchasing parity power parity theory, you understand that it is not trying to say this country is far worse than this country. They're trying to use a metrics that accounts for that is neglected in the other measurement, which is the exchange rate. And we can see that when we look at the increase in dollar, it affects the common man. Immediately they say, okay, dollar is 900, you want to buy a commodity, and they're already pricing it because markets are dynamic, they are not static, they react. They don't just fall in part. It's not ceteris paribus. So we have to really take a picture and look at how we are looking at inflation again, according to Hanks.
Okay, because I just borrowed a leaf from predictions using international parameters, acceptable global parameters to measure security, for instance. And they said before 2015 that Nigeria was going to disintegrate and all that. It didn't happen, but they used international parameters to measure that. But that aside, some have tried to explain why this is happening. They say savings, global recessions and so many other things are the cause of this inflation. What would you say is really the cause of this inflation?
Well, according to the data, the major driver of inflation is food. And for a country as peculiar as Nigeria, we have to look at the data to guide us. And when you look at the data and you look at the CBN evaluation of the data, you see that most of our cost comes from transportation from food in the farmhouse and food in the market. So you see that food at farm point is relatively stable, but by the time it gets to the market, it's actually increased. So what do we do here? This shows that there is a large there's much of work we have to do when it comes to reducing the transport costs and the ease of doing business in Nigeria in order to smooth in inflation. Another thing is our import dependency. Import dependency is such that we use most of our commodities used in Nigeria are import dependent. That means we demand for it from foreign countries like the US, China, and Japan. And this means that we are going to transact for these commodities with dollar. And we have foreign appetite. So we have our people going out to migrate and going out for schooling outside the country, which means not just brain power, but our money is living and chasing other currencies. This puts pressure on the Naira and causes what we call import-driven inflation.
Let me rephrase. Is this a peculiar problem to Nigeria? Because people say, or the people who we are trying to hold accountable are telling us that it's a global thing. Everybody is experiencing this. What are the peculiarities to Nigeria that you feel are the ones that are making us particularly get to this level of inflation? Because inflation is everywhere. It's even in America. Everywhere there's inflation.
Just like I repeated, most of the particularities, like I said, Nigeria is a country that has over 200 million populace. So let's just say this 200 million populace is demanding for rice and is dependent for rice, and we know how much we are dependent for running rice, even though the rice is at ban list. So when this kind of multitude of demand is requesting for food on a daily basis, they have the appetite to have transactions on a daily basis, demanding for the dollar. This and the dollar keeps on leaving the naira. So we are saying, okay, we have the exchange rate pressures, we have the pressures of the bottlenecks. Okay, the farmers are having problems growing their feed, and when they are growing their feed, they're having problems getting their food from their farm to their what they call it, to their house. These are to the market. These are problems that are peculiar to just Nigeria. But inflation and global inflation is something that is happening everywhere. But to actually understand the peculiarity to Nigeria, we have to look at it to the figures and to the numbers. The way inflation is impacting Nigeria is different from the way it's impacting the UK or the US. We can see that the US have already started seeing a nosedive in inflation figures, reducing lower than what experts were expecting. While Nigeria's inflation is skyrocketing, and we're having an exchange rate crisis, to be honest. So we really need to look at the dynamics when we're talking about inflation and try and zone in on the structure. So the particular inflation Nigeria is experiencing is particularly structurally driven.
So what do we do to curb it? This is hyperinflation and it seems scary. What can we do to curb this hyperinflation, especially with the falling naira?
And like you have said, first we're trying to stop the naira from falling. And the only way and the only long-lasting way of stopping the naira from falling is to uh, the only way from stopping the naira from falling is to shore up the production and shore up exports. That's the only long-lasting solution. Because any other solution is whitewashing. Any other solution is deviating from the main purpose, right? So we have had the CBN throw out different schemes in order to boost the currency, and we have seen the currency those dives. So if we are really looking at a long-lasting solution, we must look at the fundamentals. Let our export exceed our imports. Let stop the import-driven appetite, and this all would stop the inflation and increase the value of the naira in the long run.
Okay, let's leave inflation a little bit and go to the budget, even though they are related in some way. The recently presented budget, some queried the rising recurrent expenditure captured in the budget, especially in light of the fact that there's embargo on employment and so many other things. But the recurrent expenditure in that budget was eye-popping as well. So what's your take on this budget that was recently presented?
Well, Nigeria is a country, like I said, that doesn't produce, which means it's really hard for us to generate appropriate revenue without our dependency on oil. And having the budget at that level shows that it might actually be like an underestimation because we're actually optimistic about the price of oil. And we must the budget of the current expenditure having a budget deficit is not necessarily a problem. We're looking at the appropriate use of government funds to actually scale and create appropriate economic growth in the economy in order to drive the GDP to the right position.
Okay, finally now, we have two very, very important things coming up. We have the redesigning of the Naira and we have the election. So do you see something, the economy being better or worse because of these two things that are coming? First of all, the redesigning of the Naira, and secondly, the election.
Well, for the redesign of the Naira, the rationale for the redesign of the Naira was meant to actually put back money into the banks. And the CBN clearly stated that close to 2.3 trillion of the Naira is outside the banking sector. So any policy that would actually drive the money into the banking sector and create more financial inclusion is actually supposed to be promoted. On the other hand, whether it's going to promote economic growth and help the economy, it's not. There is no direct link to that. But like I said, promoting financial inclusion can have economic growth prospects in the long run. While for the elections, the redesign of Naira will actually put a little strain on the politicians that have stockpiled Naira with hopes of spending it during the common elections. So I don't think it might be enough to deter them, but at least it might keep a little bit of stress on them.
This is a question I'm going to ask everybody. So just briefly, in a matter of seconds, please, what kind of government do you want in 2023? What will you be looking out for in a president that will lead us into the future?
Well, I
Is that a
think
hard one for you,
the
if I?
way things. Yes, it is a hard one for me. So I'm going to the way I'm feeling about Nigeria. I just pray we have a government by 2022, regardless of the government. You understand? So that's my perspective.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ifeanyi, for coming on the show today and sharing with us your thoughts and knowledge.
Thank you.
Okay, let me go back to Bayo. Bayo, you've been listening to Ifeanyi, I hope, and he's painted a picture of gloom and doom, if you ask me. What is your take on it?
I was actually looking forward to hearing Ifeanyi speak because I was curious when I saw the projected 52% inflation rate, according to Professor Hans. But listening to Ifeanyi, I seemingly actually agree with most of what he has said. Because for me, I'm not an economist, but basically what I can see is that there's a lot of strain on the Naira as successive governments. And if we do not address the root cause, that is, if we don't deal with what puts pressure on the Naira, we are going nowhere. For instance, and like you rightly said, raw materials are largely imported. They are dollar dependent. We spend a sizable amount of money paying school fees. If a Nigerian undergraduate in the United Kingdom is being financed by his parents from Nigeria, that is £12,000 per annum. Just school fees alone. We are not talking of accommodation. We are not talking of feeding. So times that number by the number of Nigerian undergraduates in the UK, and that's the UK alone. We are not talking of the US. We are not talking of Asian universities. Then many Nigerians go abroad for health, those who can afford it. We import a lot of automobiles from abroad. Then we bring in a lot of medicines from abroad. If you look in the 70s and 80s, when the Naira was initially, when one US dollar was 63 kobo, and later on, even when one US dollar was 1 Naira under the Buhari government, you will find that we were all driving made in Nigeria cars. They were either Peugeot or Volkswagen. Our children were going to Nigerian universities. Okay, if people fell sick, they went to Nigerian hospitals. So this today is a reversal of that scenario, and that's what puts pressure on the Naira. So I agree with Ifeanyi. If we don't deal with what puts pressure on the Naira, we will not solve the constant collapse of the Naira, especially when crude oil is threatened in the international market by various dynamics beyond our control. The other quick point I would like to put in, also deriving from the analysis, brilliant analysis that Ifeanyi gave, is that in the First Republic, we had what we called marketing boards. If you take the Western region, there was the Western Nigeria Marketing Board, which for short became WEMA Board, okay? And they would buy up cocoa from the cocoa farmers, they would store it, they would export it, and so on. Why can't we go back to having the marketing board system? Because Ifeanyi said that to bring crops from the farms to the market is the biggest problem we are having today. Either the roads are bad, or there's insecurity, or we don't have storage. So why can't state governments create things that are close? Somebody might say they disagree with me now because people want less of government. But for me, if something is working well, why should we change it? Simply because we should change what isn't working. So if the marketing board system is going to serve us well, especially given the peculiarity of our environment,
Yeah.
I feel that we could revisit it.
Okay, well, much to be talked about when we talk about economics, and we'll just take a break here, and when we return, we'll return with Tolani, and you'll be shocked at what she can do and what you can learn from her. Stay with us.